Good afternoon. It is 12 o'clock, and we are going to call this study session to order. Counselor Gathers.
Thank you, Madam President. I have item A, just local law of the City of Syracuse to grant the permanent easement to Niagara Mohawk Power Corporation, Verizon Network Incorporated on the properties of Shea Middle School and Bellevue Elementary School for the new electric service and new telecommunication service detailed in Exhibit A. Call this item ready.
Thank you. And before I move on, I just want to make note that Counselor Paniagua is on jury duty, so she will not be in today. And I have item 9, and I'm going to withdraw that. Counselor Caldwell.
Thank you, Madam President, and blessings to all. I have items 10 through 12, and they're all set unless any of my fellow counselors have any questions. Thank you.
Counselor Green.
Thank you, Madam President. I have 13 through 19. 13 will be introduced and tabled. Items 14 through 19 are ready, unless there's any questions.
Who's on Counselor Paniagua's committee? Go ahead, thank you.
All right, so Counselor Paniagua has item 20. She did say that it was ready unless anybody had any questions. All right, all set.
Counselor Gathers.
Thank you, Madam President. I have items 21 through 44. Is there any updates or details pertaining to items 21 through 23?
Deputy Mayor, Saturday I sent the council an email. It lays out the current inventory, the inventory of pending cameras. It lays out the process for funding installation. It has a section about how we can modify the method by which we currently seek funding, and it speaks to identifying, going forward, a fund for cameras that gives us a flexibility to be able to not be as dependent on DASNY. Doesn't mean that we would not continue through our state legislation to seek DASNY funding, but because of the time it takes to get DASNY funding, it would give us some flexibility. So we would collectively need to really identify the amount of that funding. I included some ranges for you in there. And then information about the current regulations concerning DASNY funding. And we talked about that in the last study session because the state bonds itself for the funds, that we can't bond for funds that are directly tied just to DASNY funds. And then the last section spoke to parks, Councilor Caldwell's concern. So it really explains the parks identified through this discussion. Corey is identifying in the current parks capital plan funding to address the parks that you addressed. And she's doing an overall, as part of our OKR process for senior team, an overall capital plan for the parks that will include cameras moving forward.
So, Deputy Mayor, is this capital plan for 2024?
It will be 20, sorry.
Corey Dunham, no, the funding's available now. So it's just lining everything up with SPD and IT. It should be easier for facilities like McChesney and Wilson that already have networks there because they have computers and data. McKinley will be a little bit of a challenge just because, it'll just take a little bit more, but we have the funding available now so we can go install them as soon as we get the cameras in hand and can get the data lined up. So I would say, a few weeks, hopefully.
So the other question, thank you for that one.
Of course.
For the other question is for, Madam President asked last time with the ARPA money for the cameras. We can't use the ARPA money to further get these cameras out and ready?
So the existing ARPA money, I believe, is designated I'll get that answer for you between now and the vote. But the existing ARPA money, Brian, because we have existing ARPA money for cameras, correct? Is that all spoken for? So we can look into that with the police department because you've already approved those funds.
And that's in addition to the capital money that Corey
In
just talked.
addition to the capital
So we'll have
money.
the capital money from parks, and we'll have the ARPA,
Yes.
any extra ARPA
Any
money
of the
to
extra.
alleviate any concerns about the parks.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Just one point regarding the use of the ARPA funds. The reason that thus far ARPA funds have been designated to maintenance is because we can't apply DASNY funds to maintenance of existing cameras. And so we've tried to use the ARPA funds in a place where we can address a current need, which Chief Cecil always points out, cameras only have a certain life and we need continued maintenance. So there was a reason why ARPA funds were driven toward the maintenance work, if that's helpful.
So let me ask a question about that. Greg, you can stay here too, and also you, Deputy Mayor, because when we're talking about these funds, and maybe it's stopped or maybe I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but as far as police, you can tag in forfeiture money. Do you guys still do that? Because to me, the forfeiture money is a deterrent, so that should be able to be used.
Ryan Lutz, Police Department. What was the question again, ma'am?
Forfeiture money, do you guys still do that?
We do still receive forfeiture money from both the federal government and the state, yes.
Okay, so what I'm curious to know is, I know that that money is used for like different types of reductions in crimes, different crime reduction tactics, which the cameras are. So could the forfeiture money be used for cameras?
The forfeiture money can be used to buy new cameras. I know that for sure. As far as the maintenance on the existing cameras, that I'd have to go back and double check for you.
Okay, I'm curious about the new cameras, so you
Yes, it
can
can be
use
used for that.
forfeiture for new
Yep.
cameras.
Just President Hudson, one priority for the, make sure what we already have in inventory is staying with the needs of the police department. So he's also on parallel track, ensuring that cameras we have now are upgraded and ensuring that they can function the way the police department needs them to. Because we've had them for a long time, some of them.
So my other question is, which sort of hasn't been answered, and maybe I'm explaining it wrong. We can't use ARPA money to move forward with these existing cameras that we're waiting on that might wait to 2024. Because when we last talked, study session, it was like an 18-month wait. So we're talking about 2024, possibly 2025.
So Jen is not in here. The question would be, could we be reimbursed? Can DASNY reimburse ARPA funds?
Right.
I'll
'Cause you
find
guys-
out.
Right, because you clearly stated, like, there's a process. You guys gotta get the money, you gotta order cameras, right? So if we can work on the process, we have ARPA money now, and get paid back, why aren't we
You're saying
using
yes or no? Are you thinking?
Deputy Mayor, Janet didn't find out, did you find out whether we?
I did reach out to them, but I guess I didn't
Jen-
realize you were asking about,
Here?
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Sorry. Excuse me, Janet Burke, the Director of Research. I didn't realize last week that you were asking about specifically for ARPA, reimburse ARPA money. I asked if they could reimburse money, and they said yes, depending on the date of the contract. So, but I didn't
they
realize.
did say they could
Yes, but I
reimburse
didn't
our
realize we were talking about.
bond money? So if we bonded it, they would reimburse us?
No. It can't be bonded, no matter what. The DASNY money cannot be bonded. So, but if we have a contract in process for a project that is not bonded, they are fairly flexible because of the amount of time it takes for a contract when we put as a start date for that contract. So for example, they're usually very flexible if we put a contract date of 7/1, even though we don't get the contract till December 1st. So that they would pay anything from 7/1 forward, even though we don't have the finished paperwork until the end of the year.
But we still don't know about ARPA.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask that question. I can certainly call them and ask them, but Jen may know the answer.
Well, don't we have a sunset? We have to use the ARPA money at a certain, it's by the end of 2024. So wouldn't it be possible that we could use that money for some of the cameras, correct?
Yes, we would just have to move it from somewhere else, other than the $100,000 that the police department has just talked about.
But we were here last time, and, you know, I know we have money allocated, but that's not necessarily money spent. So I'm just wondering, and I mean, the $1 million we got for the gang initiative, that's money that wasn't originally slated, really. We moved that-
it was.
But we moved it from somewhere else.
No, it was in the original plan, under children and families.
Say so. Well, it's children and family, but it certainly wasn't under that title.
I am saying so because I was pushing for that violence money to be in that allocation.
I must have misinterpreted the title that originally was in then. But I mean, Jen, I mean, just join in here.
Yeah, so I think, Jen Tiff, Director of Strategic Initiatives. So the one thing to be aware of, I think, with ARPA is we would likely, I think, have to move that funding from another planned purpose to do this. And that's primarily because we have about 18 months left to allocate all of our ARPA funds or to commit all of our ARPA funds. I'd be worried with DASNY, for example, if it takes them, let's say, 18 months to give us that funding, we're right up against the federal deadline to commit those funds, and then we can't allocate them to anything else. So if, for example, we received a check from DASNY on like January 1st of 2025, it could reimburse the ARPA money, but then we're out of time to allocate that ARPA money to anything else that we could use ARPA for. So I think the strategy would be less to use ARPA now and then get that reimbursed by the DASNY funds. I think we'd basically have to be making the call, if we're going to use ARPA for more cameras now, we're intentionally not using that ARPA money for something else we've planned to do with it.
We're talking about like a 2.5 year before we can get more cameras, if you do the timeline.
I mean, unless we find another source that makes it possible sooner.
And what we are proposing and what I put in there was through our budget process. So it's not the current year, but allocating a fund for this purpose so we have the flexibility as a city to use funds within our own control for camera installation. So something may come up even outside of the DASNY process, that fund would help us allocate cameras.
So with the ARPA monies being spent and the money that was allocated for different businesses, where are we? Do we know like what hasn't been spent? Who was projected to use the money? I mean, I know we allocate this, but in our minds, we know it's not going to be spent.
I believe a recent report was given. Can you come back up? Thank you.
Jen, maybe it's helpful to, I mean, I know you gave us that report, it was maybe a month or two ago, and maybe you could just update it with whatever's changed in the last month or two and then send it around to the council.
Yeah, we can send an updated ARPA report just so everyone can see that. As of right now, we are overcommitted against ARPA by about $10 million. So we have 123 to spend. We've essentially committed that around 133 million, 134 million. Obviously, because we know we need to be able to truly get it all committed by December so we don't give any of it back. We're trying to remain flexible. But right now we have more requests that we've entertained than we have money to fund. So anything on top of that just makes a larger, gap for us.
You said you had a 123, you've overcommitted by 133. So commitment versus what's actually been done.
Yeah, so I think right now we have fully legally committed 75% of the funding. So whatever that equates to, which is a pretty, high percentage. So I'll send an updated list just so that you can see, what we've committed funds to, what we've spent funds on, what is technically remaining. But in terms of what you all have authorized, you've already authorized more than the 123 we have available. So obviously as we
only authorize what you presented to us.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we've been presenting more like we do with the capital.
Ownership here too.
Yeah, of course. No. The intent has always been to present more so that we can make real-time decisions about spending the money or obligating the money by that December 31st deadline, so we don't get left, holding $500,000 that we then have to give back to the federal government. So we're trying to line ourselves up to fully commit all of it, and not be in a position where you have to give anything back to Treasury.
I think what Councilor Green has suggested is a good.
Yeah, we'll send an
is to
update.
Come back again with an update, either in physical or both in physical and a committee meeting if you'd like that. But I just want to make sure we're clear, is for right now, Parks Capital Plan is identifying funds, and then we will turn around and get with the police department on unspent ARPA to meet the needs, particularly for parks, to identify. Many of those we probably will install on the buildings themselves.
Well, the Parks Capital Funds would be from this year's budget.
Yes.
So we'd be able to put them up.
Yes.
Okay, this year.
Yes, I want to say thank you for moving fast and quick on that. I received several calls from the team about that, so I appreciate that, and the community appreciates that. But I want you guys to dig deep, right? And I'm gonna let us move forward. Unless anybody else has any questions, that we look at the ARPA and figure out how can we move something, because the cameras, we know from the statistics that the police said, it helps, right? And I think it's important. No, do we want to be a city with cameras everywhere, but we also want to deter some of the violence that's going on. Our numbers are even higher than they were last year. So I'm just want you guys to dig deep, figure out, because within 48 hours, y'all figured this out. So that was amazing, right? 48 hours, y'all was like, nope, we can get cameras. Here's that good, right? So I want us to dig deep and figure out what we can do for the cameras in the community, because they're especially in the high crime pocket areas where the community is calling and asking for cameras. It's 3 years is really killing me. Like my stomach, that's 3 years knowing that, if not longer, because it's still a process, that we might not get cameras.
We'll still be looking at DASNY. We're not going to stop that. We're going to look for the state to help fund us, but alternatives are finding other resources to offset that time frame.
Or we could
'Cause-
certainly incorporate in next year's capital budget for the Parks
Absolutely.
Department, too.
Yep.
So that when we wouldn't have to wait for DASNY funds.
Absolutely.
We also get a list of the outstanding DASNY grants for cameras and which state legislator is attached to it.
So you have the outstanding grants, but I will go back and tell you which. For the most part, it's Pam Hunter, but I will verify that. Okay. But they have done their job because it got in the budget, and then it goes to the state agency, and it's a state agency that we work with.
I just want to know so we can lobby for more.
Yeah, majority of it is Pam Hunter, but I will verify. Okay.
Also, the camera locations are noted, which is amazing because we're always asking where they are. But is it possible to get the functionality of each to know which ones are actually working? Or
Rich Shaw, First Deputy Chief of Police. That's a moving target. We get a report a couple times a week, and it's usually around 30 cameras that aren't functioning, and it changes every time. I can send you a copy of one just so you can see what it looks
I
like.
think some are, or it seems that some have been broken for a while, for whatever reason, they're older cameras, they need a total replacement, or there's a part you can't get, or something like that.
Yeah, so like I mentioned last week, Chief Cecil and I are actually meeting with IK Systems, I said it was tomorrow, was today, 2 o'clock, to try to figure out how to improve that process.
Are any of the new proposed cameras paired with Shot Spotter?
No, they don't prepare with shots.
They're not? Okay.
So two different contracts.
Right, but are we looking to put them in like close proximity of each other?
No, they're kind of two separate things. There's technology out there, but it's very expensive.
Okay.
Kind of kicked it around where they do tie together, but we don't have that right now.
Okay.
We identify shot spotters for our, oh my God, I forgot the
Icon
term.
frame.
Hotspot communities, absolutely.
Okay.
The fact that they're hotspot communities means that we're probably prioritizing them for cameras as well, is in addition to the hots.
I think that's what you're asking. Not that the systems ties together, just the places where we have shot spotter, are there also cameras? So that way, if it goes off, we can look back and see what happened.
A lot of them do kind of overlap each other, but it's not, I mean, it's kind of intentional because it's hotspot policing, like Deputy Mayor was saying, when we're having our problems, where we try to put the stuff.
Okay.
So I want to go into one of the items here, Deputy Mayor, with the report you just gave us. Project 25288 is Furman all the way to Salina and Seneca Turnpike. It says it's approved and it's in the process. What does that mean? Where are we with it? Is it
So we're
is it
in that,
order?
it's been allocated from the state budget to the department, State Department, DASNY. So now this is the process where the police and Janet work through the process of actually getting the funding to us so we can buy the equipment.
Okay, so we haven't even got to buying them. We're just trying to transition the money over.
It's all administrative contractual right now. Yeah.
And do we know when we can actually see, because this has been a while for example, Valentine, I remember putting that request in and it has been a minute. When do we see those
2022.
actually going up? Approximately.
The one from 21, the one that, I think that's the second, hold on, let me go back to the first one. The first one, we have, there's a small balance left, so that one's almost been, it's paid completely. The 200,000 that's been approved by DASNY and it's still in the process. So it should be this one in particular, the second box for 200,000. I'm hoping within the next several weeks that one may come, but this is really truly just a guess. The 191 were also approved by DASNY. It just, they have a process where I think they have 6 different departments look at each grant. So if somebody's on vacation, it gets held up for 3 weeks here or 2 weeks at the next place. But I'm hoping in the next couple of months for that one. And the last one is a brand new one. This is one we've sent in our information to DASNY just recently, and now they'll start doing their due diligence.
So if it say here on the contract date, it says October 1st to December 23rd for the project 2528. What's that? Is that the time to move the money over, or what's
No,
that?
that's just the date they used as the beginning of the contract. They don't really have an end date. So once they just use they give us a beginning date, and then they like us suspended as soon as possible, but they know sometimes with the municipalities, it takes a little while. So there isn't really a firm end date, they just give us the first date.
They haven't taken that contract date and said, give us the money back.
Oh, no,
That
no.
doesn't happen.
Based on this timeline, we're looking at, this happened in October 2022, and we're in 2023. And when we do this, do we already have the cameras prepared? Like, have we already talked to the next step? Like, okay, we're...
Oh, the chief could speak to that, but Kevin Amadon, who's in charge of the cameras, he is fantastic. He's got it all together, and once that money's available, he's ready to go.
Does this have to do with National Grid and Verizon too, these cameras?
Yes.
How are we with that? I know you guys said we're moving forward, we're communicating with them.
Well, so what has happened with us is DASNY always, we have quite an old agreement with both Verizon and National Grid that we have always used as our, just they can say you can use our poles or whatever it is. DASNY last year, maybe mid-year, decided that they weren't going to take those as documents anymore for proof that we can use the poles. We worked with them to come up with a different idea. Nothing seemed to make them happy. So our grants person at DASNY said, you know what, I'm going to send this through again, and I'm going to just see if they kick it back, because sometimes it's a little arbitrary. And so far, it's still going through the process. So we're hoping it's past the point where someone would have kicked it back, and maybe they've changed their stance and will let us use those 2 agreements as we always have.
Again, all of that is why as we look at the next fiscal year, and the some flexibility for this funding in the general fund and the capital.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for any of the other items? None? All right, thank you, Madam President.
All righty, Counselor Hogan.
Thank you, President Hudson. I have items 45 through 54. And unless there are any questions, they're all, if 45 I'll introduce and table, of course. 46, 47, 48, 49 through 54, unless there are any questions, they're all ready.
Councilor Majok.
Thank you, Madam President. I have item 55 through 65. Item 55 to 60 are ready. Item 61 to 65 will be held.
Got it.
Thank you.
Councilor Allen.
Thank you. Thank you. I have items 66 through 72. All items are ready.
Oh, okay, yes, and we're going to go back to Councilor Green to do 69 and 70.
Yeah, during the vote, right?
Yeah, when we vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, you can do 68, 69, and 70, because I'm going to abstain from all three. Yeah. That's what I said, that's for 1 o'clock.
She can.
But yeah.
Councilor Green.
Thank you, Madam President. I have waiver item 73. Commissioner, you want to just briefly explain this?
Good afternoon, Councilors. Matt OJ, Commissioner of Assessment. We requested item 13, introducing a local law to modify our disability exemption. We neglected at the time to request an ordinance authorizing public hearing, so we're doing so now via the waiver agenda.
Any questions? Thanks, Commissioner.
Thanks all.
To explain what happened is that it was overlooked that we needed the local law to go with item 13. We needed the public hearing to go with item 13.
Councilor Gathers.
Thank you, Madam President. I have waiver item number 74. And ask if Mr. Joe Berry can come up and just explain this particular general ordinance change.
Yes, good afternoon, councilors. Joe Barry, First Assistant Corporation Counsel. The Common Council has requested that our office draft some amendments to the current rollout of the new solid waste program. And I think it might be helpful to explain kind of a quick overview how we got here legislatively. So if you go back to the original program, it's contained in Article 2, Chapter 14 of the Revised General Ordinances, which was adopted way back in 1992. So when the administration came to you and to us to craft the new program, it was going to be on a rolling out basis. So legislatively, we did this by taking Article 2, which would continue to apply citywide, but adding an Article 6, which would be specific to the rollout of the new solid waste cart program. And this was adopted by the council in the spring, and the rollout started, and obviously a lot of questions arose. So now the council, my understanding, is asking for amendments to kind of put a freeze on the rollout and a freeze on the monetary fines that apply to Article 6 in the rollout area, just that section of the city with the new carts. So the amendment before you would say to the commissioner, you have to, the rollout will continue where it is, but before you add new routes, you have to come back to the Common Council for permission. And then in addition, while we're working out these questions, the current rollout area, the routes, the fines contained in Article 6, which is just for the rollout, will no longer apply. But the Article 6 residents, those who have the new carts, will still be subject to certain provisions of Article 2, specifically illegal setouts. So it's not going to be a free-for-all where they can just ignore the solid waste ordinance. They have to comply with the previous provisions that came before this program. And technically, they're still supposed to use the new carts in the manner mandated by the amendment, but the monetary fines are suspended until we sort this out further.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Given the last study session that we had, there were some many different comments, questions, and concerns that the council had gave out to the administration. We did receive an email and with some new updates and some new recommendations. If Corey, if you would like to come forward and express those.
Thank you, Counselor. So yes, we heard the concerns from the council during the committee meeting, specifically as it relates to education, outreach, and addressing non-compliant cart set out. So I sent an email with a number of amendments or suggestions that we could make to try and address those while still, trying to, I guess, I can go through them, Counselor, or how would you like? Yeah, okay.
Yes,
so the first one was to return immediately to issuing warning stickers. So that would, in effect, suspend the fines, but pair that with education to let people know what it is that we expect them to do so that we can troubleshoot. So we would propose, our proposal is to do this for 3 to 4 weeks. We have about 6 weeks left in phase 1, but open to the council's feedback on whether they think that is sufficient time. So that would be the first one, to try and increase that education and outreach, but issue warnings, go back to what we were doing in the beginning and extend that time frame, which effectively suspends the fines for the time being. We could amend the ordinance to have a reduced fine that is specific to cart compliance. So rather than the $350 for illegal set-outs, which is, you put out 6 TVs and a carpet and just trash everywhere, we could have a lower fee for just cart-related violations. And so, I have a suggested amount in there, but open to what the council would be interested in discussing on what an amount might be appropriate. Committing to the council that by the end of this week, we will have proposals before you of how we plan to address, what are some proposals that we could address people, those residents who are finding that 96-gallon cart is not enough for them. So looking at what other municipalities have done and put that before the council to see how can we maybe accommodate those folks, whether it's a second cart, however we want to address that. We can send out an additional mailing to phase 1 and have it specific to set out requirements and make sure that it's not just the carts are coming, go to our website, which was kind of the idea, and highlighted some of the things about set outs, but we could make one specific to set outs to make sure that people understand. But again, pairing that with finding alternative options, what can we do to, in terms of providing an additional cart. In phase 2, we can significantly increase the number of weeks that we would do warnings. In phase 1, we did 2 to 3 weeks of warnings. We could significantly extend that time period to give people enough time to understand what we're looking for them to do, and that would also obviously, effectively suspend cart-related violations and fees. Open to the council. We put in the email 4 to 6 weeks in phase 2, but open to the council on whether or not we think that's enough time.
Corey, when we talk about phase 2, phase 1 was 20% of the city. Phase 2 would be the entire 80%. Are we considering it not being the whole 80% and going in maybe more than just 2 phases?
So the challenge, open to having a conversation about it, absolutely. I think the challenge is, we really, given DPW's resources, we really don't want to roll this out during the winter time. And so that, if we do another 20%, that pushes the whole rest of the city until, late spring, early summer. But I absolutely think it's worth a conversation about, from a logistical standpoint, how we think we'll be able to accomplish an 80% rollout in the time frame that we have. But.
My thought is if we don't have the kinks worked out before Thanksgiving and Christmas, you might have.
Well, I think we're hoping that if we roll them out, the first week of September, which is what we're aiming for, that Labor Day weekend, that gives us sufficient time and hopefully maybe a late winter. I'm not praying for global warming, but that would give us, 2 or 3 months to really try and work this out. And again, if we can adopt the council's suggestions for more education and outreach, perhaps there's less work to be done once the carts are actually rolled out. And then just a couple of last few ones, following up on Councilor Caldwell's suggestion. Ruthie and I already had a conversation this morning about reaching out to the school district and their Office of Family Engagement of how we can get in front of students and families to better educate residents and their families of what the expectation is with carts and what's an appropriate set out. Following up on President Hudson's suggestion, we've started working with the Parks Department and other agencies to go to festivals and take the message out to folks, the folks that we're trying to reach, so that we can have a table at city events about carts. Councilor Majoke's suggestion of once Phase 2 starts to send a targeted mailing to those folks who are getting the warning stickers, maybe with some additional information about recycling, in case maybe they're, any information that we want to impart to them about what's an appropriate set out, but also gives us an opportunity to educate them on some other items like recycling. And then Councilor Schultz's suggestion that we will create a video that will be available on the city's website, shareable through social media, that actually demonstrates for folks who, can't attend community meetings and haven't seen the other ways we try to put it out there. But I think having it on the website and shareable through social media and actual video, I'm not promising to star in it, but of how you can do an appropriate set out. So, I hope this demonstrates that, I think the committee meeting on Tuesday was our attempt to show you, how we think things are going. The feedback that we got, I think, was really helpful in terms of we got to do better with education and outreach. We got to rethink and reconsider how we're addressing folks who are non-compliant. So I hope that this at least is a starting point to address the concerns that the council raised. And again, want to talk more about it and come to a place where we're all in agreement that best serves, a place that the council, the administration, DPW is comfortable with, and then obviously most importantly our residents.
Where are we with the bag situation and the overflow of the trash?
So what we would do under what we're proposing is we would go back to warnings until we can better standardize, I think, the concerns that we raise. Commissioner Robinson has had conversations with sanitation teams to say, look, if it's, we need to have, we need to be reasonable in terms of, if a cart isn't completely, what's the difference between a cart that's not closing and a cart that's completely overflowing and there's trash everywhere? The idea is to keep the city clean. That's the whole point of this proposal. And so to leave trash at the curb because, the lid is up a little bit really kind of defeats the whole purpose of the program. So, but in the immediate term, we would be issuing warnings. So we wouldn't issue a fine for someone whose cart didn't close all the way. We would issue the warnings and be able to better track those warnings so that we can do some outreach to the folks to see, do they not understand, or is this not meeting their needs, and how can we better meet their needs? And pairing that with what I talked about, which is the proposals to the council by this Friday of options for adding an additional cart.
So with a bag, so we talked about it in our study session, but a bag. So what are we saying about if someone puts just a regular bag in there? Mm-hmm. What happens with that?
Yeah, I think that's, if they're a small bag, a large bag. For us, it's mainly as long as the trash isn't loose. That's what we're trying to discourage, is just loose trash. But if it's in a Target bag, in a grocery store bag, in a hefty bag, however it is you want to bag it, we're just trying to get people to contain it because that just keeps the city cleaner.
Well, can I say this real quick statement?
Yeah.
The other thing that I suggest too with the trash cans, as they're dumping the trash, and leaving the trash, all the lids are open, right? Mm-hmm. It's about to be winter months. Mm-hmm. Them lids open, people not home, it's gonna be full of snow.
Yep.
Right, so that's gonna be a major issue.
Understood.
Just along with that, trying to pull that trash can with snow and water in it. And did you take away the fines for the last? I just want to make sure we understood this. So for the last 20% rollout that got fined, you took them away, right?
So if that's what the council would like us to do, then that's what we will do.
Sorry, Madam President.
No, you're fine, because I was just going back. So we're just reiterating that a lot of the things that we talked about, that we're going to see that happen, and it's going to be the discretion that if there's a McDonald's bag, you're just going to dump the trash and move on, correct? So we're going to start looking at things in a more, I don't want to say common sense way, but common sense
consistent,
way.
And with the goal of the program in mind. The goal of the program is meant to keep the city cleaner. If somebody has a brown paper bag and it's rolled down, there's not loose trash coming out of it, is there that big a difference between that and a bag that's tied? Applying common sense to it, and that's continuation of the standardizing of training of the crews. And these are, I think, as the council pointed out on Tuesday, these are the lessons that we wanted to learn as part of phase one. And I think, to Councilor Caldwell's point, addressing those folks who have already been fined is a fair next step as we continue to try and figure this out.
Okay, because reading in the that the legislation that was passed, it gave you and Commissioner Robertson a year to evaluate the program, correct? So when we talk about the community and the constituents, and we're talking about what's the time frame, and you said 4 to 6 weeks, well, let's just maybe kick that out to 6 months so that we can give everybody an opportunity to catch up on the same pace and the same level.
I agree, Madam President. But what are we, so with the phase 2, right, the rollout, and it's more of the city. And right now, we know families right now need more trash cans, right? What is, in your idea, thought process?
So, I mean, that's what we need to get to you by this Friday is how are we going to accommodate those, whether it's, you know, whether it's families, whether it's not, whoever it is, residences where one cart is not enough. But, you know, for now, we will suspend fees and fines for cart-related violations, which would include, you know, you've got bags outside of the cart. You know, but I think to Joe's point, the ordinance still allows us to address things that are a violation whether or not you had a cart. So you put a TV out and, you know, that's still, you weren't allowed to do that even before carts, but specific cart-related issues that we will come to the council by this Friday with proposals of how we think introducing a second cart would work. And then in the meantime, you know, not be penalizing anybody for cart-related violations until we're all on the same page.
Corey, you know, I'm going to leave the fight for more trash bin to Councilor Caldwell.
Really?
Because she need more than
Oh, well,
I
I
do.
thought you were saying you need more.
What about residents that had requested at least a little smaller cart than how we accommodated? And now I know you and the sanitation crew have been accommodating those that call and are able to help them drag the.
I mean, we can absolutely revisit cart size. I'd like to try and get these things straightened out first and then revisit the idea of the cart size because there are a lot more logistical things to figure out and a lot more record keeping to figure out with everybody getting different cart sizes and swapping in different cart sizes all the time than it is just giving somebody a second standard size cart. So I'm absolutely open to revisiting. We just want to try and get these things resolved first.
Are we saying that?
And Counselor, I think we got to be cognizant. It could go either way too. I mean, obviously the amount of trash we haul costs us. So, I mean, you know, I think we got to figure out, you know, the smaller carts versus a person with an extra cart, where that person with the extra cart might have to pay more money to have an extra cart.
The cart would come at a cost. I mean, we're certainly able to provide these, the first one, you know, free of charge, but any additional cart would have to come at a cost because we can't just distribute 2 carts to every single person in the city.
And Corey, let me ask you this, right? So after you evaluate it, and let's just for argument's sake, say that you have, you rolled out 20%, and you find out that maybe 8-9% don't need the 96 gallon. I know we're talking about overflow now, but you may find through your evaluation that 8-9% just need 45 gallon. Would you look at that and reevaluate it?
Absolutely open to the conversation about revisiting cart sizes. I think the difficulty just comes because, especially with the number of non-owner occupied properties in the city, DPW would have to hire an entire team just to manage that because somebody asks for a smaller cart, 2 weeks later they move out of that property and the next person wants a bigger cart. So then we got to go swap that out. And then, you know, 2 months later they move out and now the person wants a smaller cart again, you know, and so they're absolutely open to the conversation. I'm not closing the door. I don't think we're closing the door on it at all, but there are a lot of logistical things to try and.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Except for if it's somebody been in their house 30 years.
Right.
And you need 45 gallon.
Right.
You need about 10
Understood.
gallons. That's about it.
With the one size cart for the city, how much we stand to save?
In saving what?
With this semi-automatic process, issuing the 96 gallon cart, was there a cost benefit analysis? So because we might be collecting more trash now because it is limited to one bucket, do we know what we stand to save?
So, I mean, the 96 gallon is what was on the books before. So it's not as if we've given people more or less capacity to throw out trash. That's what was on there before. I think where we plan to assess the cost benefit analysis is certainly in, you know, in tipping fees, in workers' comp, certainly, But I think to offer several different cart sizes would mean hiring additional staff at DPW. And so you'd have to weigh that cost and all the carts because then we'd have to store a bunch of carts, and so there would be the storage cost. So I mean, looking at other municipalities in terms of best practices and what has been the most successful in the conversations we've had, whether it's big cities like Baltimore and Charlotte or Buffalo or some of the smaller communities, universally across the board, it was, if you can go with one standardized size, that will be the most beneficial to you in the long run.
You know what Rochester is doing with it, Corey? I mean, you might have said it, but what is Rochester processing this in terms of the sizes and all of that?
So they, I'm trying to. They do have carts. I think I'll have to find out because honestly, between and we have that information: Rochester, Buffalo, Baltimore, Charlotte, Denver, lots of places that we looked at. But I can get you that information in terms of what they offer. I think it's not exactly the same as what we are offering.
I brought that up at the last meeting.
Right.
And you said that we aren't like Rochester. So,
Right.
for instance, they allow extra bags to be put next to the cart.
Mhm.
And you said we can't do that. They allow up to 60 pounds additional.
So it's not that we can't do that. It's just that the whole point of this program is to try and get away from bags at the curb. Rochester also picks up businesses. We don't pick up businesses. So their sanitation operation looks very different than ours does. But again, I'm not saying we're physically unable to pick up bags that are at the curb, but the whole point of this program was to try and get away from people putting bags of trash at the curb every week.
So I would like to say thank you, Corey, for the response to the concerns of the council.
I have another question. You trying to move on?
Yeah, we'll go ahead.
Okay, 1 second. So, no, because my phone been blowing up, so I'm getting all these questions out. So I understand why it's been blowing up. We also need to have opportunity, like we have 3 times a year you can set out. We need to be able to have 3 times a year where people can have a set out if, they're having a barbecue, so they're not penalized or feel like they got to keep trash around the house, because the next issue is going to be rodents, right, if you do that. So that needs to be out. And in the ordinance, my apologies because I didn't see it, 6 o'clock, if they don't have their trash cans in, there's
technically, could I tell you the amount of times we've actually cited people for that?
Right.
The idea is to have
to-
a guideline in place for people so that they're not leaving their cans in the street for, all week long. So, it's do we regularly cite people if they don't bring their cans in? No, but we do want to at least provide some sort of expectation that, when you come home at the end of the day, you should be bringing your can to wherever it was stored.
So I get it, but
Yeah.
that needs to be changed totally. Everyone don't get off at 6.
Right.
There's second shift, there's
Sure.
all shifts. And that people who, older people, right, who are looking at it and following the rules are like, oh my gosh, I gotta be home, right? So it makes them upset
Yeah,
and tense, right? So we need to change
Yep.
that. Yes, we do need to move the trash cans, but it doesn't need to be in orders where someone can get fined for not
Yep.
having their trash can up by
Understood.
6.
Well, being an older person who lives in a neighborhood full of younger people that never take their trash cans in, I would be against that. So,
What if you work second shift? What you gonna do?
well, I seem to work second shift as a city councilor a lot, too, because so I think we could handle it. I'd have my neighbors do it.
We can look at what other municipalities have
I
done
totally disagree.
and come to the council with maybe some proposals
Absolutely. Thank you.
to find a middle ground.
6 o'clock is not fair.
Thank you, Corey.
The idea after the day of trash removal, you have how many?
So the
How
idea
much- what's the time?
I think, Councilor Caldwell's point is a
From 6
valid
a.m.
one.
to 6 p.m., so you have 12 hours from the time.
Correct.
I mean,
But
I
if,
can-
but if you leave for work at 9 and your trash gets picked up at 10 and you don't get home till 8 o'clock at night.
We work 12-hour shifts.
Right.
A lot of people in the hospitals
Yeah,
work 12-hour shifts.
that's what the ordinance states, but to Councilor Caldwell's point, it's absolutely valid to revisit that and see if we can find, we don't want carts at the curb all week long, but maybe 6 o'clock is not really realistic for people anymore.
The next day, maybe.
The next day.
24 hours, right.
24 hours, maybe that's it. That seems reasonable.
All right. Thank you, Corey, again.
Thank you.
With that being said, with everything that's been given, I'm going to hold this until we get our decisions are made, and then we'll move forward from that. Thank you, Madam President.
All righty, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned for 10 minutes.